looking for think tank jobs, like research assistant or more. But looks like it might be kind of competitive. But I'm interested. Just been here for a week, so I don't know what to expect. I can sit right here. Okay.
Could you actually sit the way that you're normally going to sit? Oh, you're going to stand or sit? You're going to stand? Okay. That's even better. Thank you.
Appreciate it. I guess.
Okay, well, if you could stand.
Okay. I can stand wherever you need.
Oh, where you normally stand. Thank you. Appreciate it. Just framing right now. One more second, please. Thank you. We're actually broadcasting now, so you can. All right. You're normally going to be looking at the audience, so let's see.
Probably that camera?
No. Just look at the audience. Yeah. Be normal if you don't mind. Actually.
Oh, yeah. There we go.
Oh, I see. You're being hired by the analytics company. What the market is. Right. Right. And you said how long do you have to do this project? Area of research that care about taking more about the one that is defined to involve like some data from the field bank, global data, sending it up and tracing it over here. Alright, 48 hours, but it's good enough. Right. To get it done. Yeah.
That's the command center.
Well, I'm using two. This, like I said, those cameras allow me to do 9 different views. But so that I can get titling and all that other stuff, I have to use their more expensive software to mix in different cameras and different things. So right now, why is it?
That's on a different computer.
Oh, that's a problem. Oh, that might be a problem.
You can probably ask Mark to see if he can pull it up on my.
Yeah.
I
Because
have no idea how he got it.
oh, it's just slides. I'll go ask him right now. Because usually what I do is they most of the time they use one computer. Excuse me, Mark.
Yeah,
Are those slides in Google Drive or whatever?
they are in Google Drive. You want
Is it possible that you can quickly share those with them? Or are they, what are they? Are they Google Slides or what? Thank you, sorry. And by the way, we're live streaming now, so everything's working. Okay, here's a question for you. Do you have your software? If you have software installed,
well, it's running on the.
yeah, so connect to mine.
That's why. You know what happened? I just put, I think I clicked on record. So I didn't I'll just set up it's on. Oh, is it not casting? Are you? All right. Good evening, folks. Welcome. Welcome to Stats Programming DC. I'm Mark Weissman, one of the co-organizers, along with Julia, who's over there, and Abhijit, who couldn't be here tonight. So welcome to August's meetup. We're really happy to have Daniel here tonight. And if you attended Jared's talk 2 months ago, Jared hopefully encouraged you to come. He is a fun speaker. Am I putting too much pressure on you? No? Okay. Great. Well, thanks. And so I've got a couple of folks that are here for the first time, so welcome to our events. I was talking to a couple of you. So Stats Programming DC is a part of Data Community DC. We are an organization that promotes data science and analytics work in the DC area. We've been around since 2012. And right now we're basically, we have different programs. All of these are our different meetup groups. So Data Science DC on the top left usually has events. Most of our groups try to have events every month. Not all of them do. But for the most part, Data Science DC does sort of high-level talks around data science, algorithms, techniques, tools, meta stuff. Here at SPDC, we like to focus on the how. So we like to do code. This is the historical R group, so we do a lot of R in this group. We also do a lot of Python. We do other open source statistical or data programming. And that's what this is all about, like how to do stuff with code. Then we have data viz and data education. And again, we have like the whole sort of covered most of the spectrum sort of in data science and analytics. And then full stack data science and Northern Virginia data science. Those are kind of our little satellites that have started in Virginia since we do stuff mostly in downtown DC. Bill Glennon and Craig Paraso do stuff in the Tysons area or in Northern Virginia. So welcome. This is our website, datacommunitydc.org. We have a Facebook group, and right now this is being recorded and live streamed on our Facebook group and I think YouTube. So in our newsletter and calendar, we host our calendar has a lot of events, not just from ours, but people post stuff on our calendar from different tech events in the DC area. So check it out. And again, our website, our hashtag it's not here, but if you want to tweet, the hashtag we use for Data Community DC stuff is hashtag DataDC. And we have our Twitter handle. Huge thanks to our sponsors. That yummy pizza that we got today, or if you come to other events, we get empanadas. Guess what? We use sponsor money to pay for that, for food and drinks. So, and cover other operating expenses. So we really, as an organization, we have decided that we've never charged for events. We don't have a membership. And we are able to do these really because of our sponsors. So thanks to our organizational sponsors, AOL, Booz Allen, O'Reilly. I believe Novetta now is an organizational sponsor for Data Community DC. So I apologize if I'm missing anybody. Huge thanks to GW for always hosting us, and we've been really privileged to be able to use this space for many years, and we've built a great relationship with GW. And as a sponsor for Stats Programming DC, the group, we've had Microsoft as a long-term sponsor. So always looking for sponsors. If you would like to work with us and help provide refreshments and money for operating expenses, please come see us. You can speak to me, you can speak to Julia, and we can work with you, whatever you want to do. If you decide to sponsor Stats Programming DC, or if you want to sponsor the community as a whole. So we use that money for lots of different things. So again, always my plea is please support us. We do this. This is a volunteer-run organization, and again, we wouldn't be able to do this if it weren't for our sponsors. So thank you, and please sponsor us. I'll skip this because I've already talked about sponsors. This meetup is about you. This meetup is about you, and it's for you. And one of the things that I encourage folks that come, not just to learn, but I also like people, to get involved and also present. I mean, I'm sure many of you have heard this for the umpteenth time, but when I started running this group many years ago, I didn't know R, and I learned R like the first few times by listening to other people like do stuff. So it's a great learning opportunity. So please, if you want to talk, come see us. We want to have an event every month, and you know, if you're, it can be anything. Like if you're passionate about what you're doing and you just want to show, you know, we can do one of many things. We can do like a full hour's talk, which is usually kind of, most of our events are like a speaker for the entire time. Sometimes we do 2 short talks, like 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And then we also, which we might do this next month, I don't know yet, but we do lightning talks. So we got 6 or 7 people to do like short 5 to 10 minute talks. And those are great. Like those are great. That's a great experience for folks that haven't done much public speaking. They're fun, and you know, it's really an opportunity for you to talk about something that you're passionate about. So we will put out a call for presenters for lightning talks. Please take advantage of it and come and present. And if you're doing, you know, whatever it is that you're doing, if you're doing a pet project, you know, Mike, where's Mike? Mike spoke to the group many years ago. He does CNC machining with R, and you know, like, so that's what I'm talking about. Like your pet project, and it can be anything. But I really encourage you to come and not only come to the events and learn, but also come and present, because by presenting, you're getting public speaking skills. It's also a great opportunity for you to learn as you're putting your talk together. So I really encourage you. So come see me. Come talk to Julia. We're always looking for folks to give talks to the community, so please get involved. This is just a laundry list of potential topics. This is our calendar for the rest of the year. September, we had someone who said they could give a talk, but I think they're not going to be able to, so we might do lightning talks in September, because school's back in sessions, people are back in town after vacation, and it's just like a fun evening. For October, we have Garrett Earlman from our studio, and he's going to be in town teaching a class for our studio, and he's going to give a talk one of those evenings. So that should be a fantastic event. He's a great speaker. He's you know, really well-known R instructor. He's part of the R studio team. So I think he's going to talk about sort of the good and the bad of R, and also showcase some of our studio's really newest and coolest stuff. So keep that on your calendar. Do we have a date? Yeah, it's October 5th. So yeah, we'll put the announcement. Also that same week, we have Data Community DC's DataCon. And have you folks heard about the DC DataCon yet? You have. Please come, sign up, and come on October 3rd here at GW. We're going to have a whole day conference around data science and analytics. We're still working with the program. Get in touch with Sean Gonzalez or Craig Paraso if you have any questions about that. I want to see those TBDs actually have a name, so please, please come see me, and we can do something and put something on the calendar for you. All right, this is your turn. I've done enough talking. So, announcements. Are you hiring? Are you looking? Are you running a meetup? Do you have a question? This is your time to stand up and say your thing. The floor is yours.
I'll start real quick. My name's Dave. I'm looking for a professional statistician to help with a little guidance and review of some work I'm doing on a client project. I'm kind of self-taught and I have no idea. So if anybody is a professional statistician, wants a very small consulting engagement, please come talk to me later.
So come at the end of the event, come and stand here, and you can come talk to Dave if you want to. Other announcements?
Well, outside of work, I'm actually got some.
Please stand up.
I'm going to say, outside of work, I've got some crazy ideas about building a machine learning platform, which is going to be like the next big thing in artificial intelligence, data analytics. But I've got no money to pay you. If you're someone who's thinking of saying along the same lines, you want to collaborate for free, we can exchange ideas without ideas attached. We can talk. So all I have is the domain name registered. So from there.
Hi, my name is Sergio. I work at a IT consulting company. I know my company is looking at entry-level data analytics background people out of school or with some experience, and also 3 or 4 people with experience in Java that would like to learn Salesforce, Apex programming language to actually get a job doing that. So anyone that has experience or is interested in knowing more, just let me know after the talk.
Hi, I'm Wiley. I'm a transit planner with a company called Foursquare ITP, not like the app Foursquare, but it's a transportation planning company. We're doing more work with geospatial data in R, so if that's something that you are interested in doing and you also have an interest in transit, we have some job openings, so yeah, come talk.
Anything else?
You can bring it back up.
Oh, sorry. I hate the touchpad here. All right. Hey, Tommy. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for embarrassing.
All right. What happens after our meetup? Yes. What happens during beer? No. Well, yes, but there's another word for that.
Drinking?
Well, that too. It's the magic. All right.
Or life decision.
Huh? Or that too. Yeah. No. So after the event, if you want to stick around and grab a couple of beers, we have space reserved up at the 3rd floor. And you know, in all of the years of running these events, seriously, like that's like where the magic happens. It's where you get to talk to folks and get to know them better and make great friends that'll hopefully last a lifetime, or not. But stick around if you want to come for drinks, and people will sort of flow. So you can meet us there, stick around, we'll walk together, whatever. But that's our kind of tradition for data drinks afterwards. So that's us. Again, Abhijit, Julia, and myself. Get in touch with us, you know where to find us. And I'll sit down and shut up so that Dan can do his thing. So thanks, Dan, for doing this. I've known Dan for a long time, and great speaker and a lot of fun. And now he's back in town, and he was in Blacksburg for a long time, and now he's in DC for a little bit. Thank you. Thanks for doing this. So welcome.
All right, so I guess before I begin, how many of you guys are new to R in general? Or if I say, like, if you've ever worked in R Markdown, you know what I'm talking about? All right, so this, I guess, talk was mainly inspired by, this was exactly, well, almost exactly the same as a meetup I gave at the New York R Conference about 2 months ago. And the rationale behind it was some of the meetup talks were getting overly complicated, and so Jared had asked me to sort of, you know, give a talk that like goes back to basics. And so I work in R Markdown a fair amount, so I suggested, hey, let's just go down, let's just see what R Markdown can do, because over the past couple of years since it started coming into the R ecosystem, it's actually grown a fair bit amount. So hopefully, even if you use R Markdown, hopefully I can show you something that's useful, and that's all I can really ask for. So what is R Markdown? It's a way to interweave regular prose text with your R code. So this presentation that I'm doing is actually completely written in R Markdown, and what Markdown is really shorthanded HTML. So what can you do with Markdown? You can have, you know, slides with bullets. So these first couple of slides are the default. If you ever do file, new Markdown file, it gives you a generic template, and this is the template that you see, right? So you can have bullets, you can have regular text, you can have, here's an example, here's R code, and then the executed R output right underneath, right? And if you have plots, you can choose to hide your R code and just show the plot, for example, right? So this is a really great way for, you know, a report that's really consistent, that you can execute, and you'll know that all of your R code is up to date and doing everything properly, right? Many times when you give presentations or talks, like you'll have that, oh, that figure wasn't really the latest update because you forgot to copy and paste it from some location. So hopefully when you do your presentations or when you do your reports in R, you always have the latest output. So that's the goal. And so we begin with the easiest way to work with our Markdown is within RStudio. And so there's a few things. Hopefully you guys can see this. But I don't think me zooming the screen actually helps. Yeah. So if you're used to RStudio, if you go to, I think, Tools and Global Options, this is the output that you see from the global options. And I mainly just mention this because there's a few default things just as good practice that you should probably have. One of the things that I like to do and I tell everyone to do is pretty much see this top bar in the first page, just uncheck all of them. Some of the things that it talks about is when you exit R or RStudio, do you want it to save your environment when you exit out? And my rationale behind it is you probably don't want that saved. Ideally, every time you start a new RStudio session, you get a nice clean R session. You don't really want weird variables just lingering around that you don't really remember. The other benefit of just having a new R session is if you start working with very large data sets, you don't want to wait like 3 minutes just for RStudio to load itself up, because it's trying to load all of that data that you loaded into memory before back into it. And especially if you just need like a quick calculation or something, you definitely don't want to be waiting just for RStudio to load up. So that's what a lot of the, that's why I say just turn everything off. Every time you start up RStudio, you definitely want just a nice clean slate. When you work with Markdown or R Markdown, there's one setting under the code section that you want to use, and it's this tab width. RStudio had defaulted this value to 2, just so the code is a little bit more compact, and you can have like a few more characters before you hit like the rule of thumb of 80 characters wide for every line of code. But when you start rendering like bullet points and you want to have nested bullet points in Markdown, it actually only knows that a bullet point is nested if it sees 4 spaces. So that's why it suggests, just change the default to 4 so you don't end up creating this nested bullet point or nested list and then just realize when it renders it's not really nesting. So this is a talk about R Markdown, so we can't really talk about R Markdown without just going over the basics of Markdown. And so RStudio and just in general, they have this there's a whole suite of these cheat sheets that are maintained by RStudio, and they're really useful. And you can go to, in RStudio, help cheat sheets, R Markdown cheat sheets. There's that one, and then there's that pen.markdown. So there's 2 cheat sheets to help you along with what R or R Markdown and what Markdown can do. And so this is some snippet of it. So I'm slowly trying to get into the habit of when I'm like trying to teach someone something, I just go back to the original documentation, because most of your questions or problems can be solved by reading the actual documentation. So here's a piece of documentation, and on the left-hand side is what you will type in R Markdown, and on the right-hand side is what gets rendered out. So you can see a lot of it, if you just look down here on the left-hand side, it looks pretty readable. It's not, it kind of looks like code, but you can easily write it and understand it. And the benefit of this is it's not too much additional weird syntax for you to get something that's a little prettier. So you can do like equations, you can have different headers, and you can see different headers by just having 1 hash, 2 hash, 3 hash, all the way up to 6. And you'll get these nice little bolded headers going down. You can do links, you can do images, and here's an example of the bullet pointed list. And it's a single star, and then new line, indent 4 spaces, and another star, and you get another bullet pointed list. Same thing works with numbered lists. So you can just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it'll just render that list out for you quick as you want. Right? So this works in a plain text file. So all the stuff on the left, you type that in a plain text file. When you call R Markdown, or when you tell it to render it as a Markdown file, you get the thing on the right. Right? So a lot of you, when you start typing notes, you probably are typing notes like this in Microsoft Word or in the text editor anyway. So hopefully the little added bits of syntax will, you can get a nicer, prettier looking output without much more effort. The other cool thing with Markdown, if you start using like GitHub or any of those Git services, is the README file will automatically render if it's a Markdown file. So you get this nice, pretty render document on the internet, and it's not too much more work. So, since that's basically what Markdown is, so how does our Markdown play into this? So how do we get started with our Markdown file? So in the, so again, this whole why our Markdown is really cool and useful is this concept of literate programming, which is interweaving code, its output, and regular prose text all together in one document or into one kind of presentation. And the way you will create a new R Markdown file, you go to, in RStudio, you can go to File, New File, R Markdown, and you get this little pop-up window. If you've never done it before, it's going to say like, hey, you need these packages, just click yes, and we'll do its thing. So you can give it its title, I'm the author, you can give it what type of output you want. So you can have a nice HTML output, you can have a PDF output, and you can even have a Microsoft Word document. The cool thing about Markdown is the translation layer between Markdown and all the other formats is handled through something called Pandoc. So as long as you have a Markdown file, you can create any of those other types of outputs. So don't really feel like, oh, I have to pick Microsoft Word, and then that's it, right? So you can very easily switch between various formats. And you can create presentations. If you know about Shiny, you can also create Shiny presentations or Shiny apps embedded into like a Markdown document. So there's a nice little GUI to set everything up for you. What you can also do in a Markdown file is, you can write your LaTeX equation. So you can say like 1/2 of alpha, and you have like the whole suite of mathematical math notation for you. All right, so what happens when you create this new file? So this is the actual file that you get. On the very top, you'll see 3 dashes, some text, followed by another 3 dashes. And that's what's called a YAML header. So YAML is just a very simplified piece of syntax that lets you configure something. So this YAML header tells our Markdown, hey, what do you want the output to look like? So you can see my title is going to be untitled. I have the author, you have the date, and here you see the output is HTML document, right? So I can change this to PDF document. If I don't want the HTML document anymore, it'll render the PDF or Word. So you can very easily switch between formats, and you can do a lot of other cool things just by tweaking this YAML header. And then the rest of it, so this part in white, that's regular Markdown. That's everything I just showed you before with the single hash, double hash, the bullet pointed list, et cetera, et cetera. That's regular Markdown. The R Markdown part comes from these grayed out parts in RStudio, and begins with 3 backticks, a set of curly brackets, and it closes off with another 3 backticks. And every time an R Markdown document sees that notation, it knows whatever in between those backticks is going to be regular R code. All right, so you can see this first one by default, it's just saying, hey, knitr is the system that renders R Markdown, and it's going to say echo equals true. So every time I have a bit of R code, just show the R code. So the second slide where I showed you that little table of R output, so that's literally running the summary cars from R and spitting out the output, right? So this is R code. And then that little plot that we saw earlier, it's plot pressure, right? So that's R code that was getting live executed, and then the output was being returned. And so here's a little, I think this was like the actual YAML header when I first gave this presentation. So it was back to basics. I have a subtitle called Are You Markdown? Here's my name, here's the date, and here's here's something I've tweaked, right? So before there was like an HTML document, a PDF document. Like I said, you can create presentations like this one that I'm presenting to you guys is written in R Markdown. And this little horizontal and vertical slide system is using a system called reveal.js. It's a JavaScript library, but it's really popular and cool, so it's been implemented like everywhere. So I can say, hey, my output is really this reveal.js presentation. I want the thing to be dark. Every time you see code, here's the color scheme for it. I have some CSS stuff because I wanted 2 panels, so I have my own CSS file attached. Self-contained essentially says, hey, when you generate this presentation, it's going to come out as an HTML file. Do you want all of those images and all of that stuff embedded in the same file? And that's what this is saying. So this way I can email like any of you guys this presentation, and hopefully all the images and everything loads up. And I don't have to like have this other folder of images that it has to be in the right path. And that's pretty annoying. And then there's some other options. So you can see like at the bottom corner, there's like this number telling me what thing I'm on, and then don't remember what preview links did, but I had opted to set that to true for some reason. And so Reveal.js doesn't by default come within the presentation system, so you actually have to install it like a regular R package. So here's a link, and I'll post these. These slides are all posted, so you'll definitely have access to all those links. But this is the main documentation page for how Reveal.js works, and this is how I found all of these little parameters. So definitely don't feel pressured to remember everything I presented. And so remember that output part in the YAML header, so there's various different types of output. So there's the HTML output, PDF output, Word, ODF, which is the open document. So you can also have regular Markdown output, so you write our Markdown to give you Markdown. What that really is doing is if you have like a plot or our output, it will be rendered in the Markdown output as well. If you work with GitHub, so you can create your README files using our Markdown, and then so that's when, sometimes when you go to the main GitHub page of an R package, you see like everything's really rendered nicely, and all of a sudden they have like this R code and the output of the R code all in there, and it's all kept up to sync, and that's because they're using an R Markdown document, and the output is going to be a GitHub document. I/O slides, Slidey, and Beamer, those are different presentation things. The one I'm using is called Reveal.js. And then so each different output has, so this is all part of that cheat sheet as well, right? So this is me just showing you, pointing you at the documentation. So each one of these different types of output have different other features, right? So why a lot of people use HTML is just because there's the most amount of these X's are checked off in HTML. So you actually have the most flexibility of how you want to tweak your R Markdown output if it's HTML. And so for example, what's something that's kind of cool? Like MathJax. So MathJax is a system, it's an online system that renders all those LaTeX equations. So you'll really only get it if you have like an HTML document or one of the other presentation stuff. So if your output is like PDF, you can't really use MathJax, but if your output's PDF, you can probably just write the thing in pure LaTeX anyway. But if it's a Word doc, I don't think you can have nice, pretty LaTeX math in there. So just something to keep in mind. If there's a feature that you really want, you might be limited in what type of output that you have. All right, and then so you can put that all together. So all of that stuff ends up going to this YAML header, and then you get to click this little blue knit button, and then the output gets created. So these R chunks, so don't mind this little square bracket, because it gets really hard to show the 3 backticks, like R chunk, when you're writing, when you're telling it to like, hey, I actually want this verbatim. So I kind of have to like hack my way through just to show this to you. But so the way these R chunks work, there's 3 backticks minus the square. Instead of curly brackets, it's actually important that you have the word R, saying that it's a R chunk. Later on, I'll show you what else you can do. And you can have like these different types of options. So this is saying that, hey, given this chunk, what do you want me to do with it? Like actually evaluate it. And so I can say, hey, set n equals 10 and run r node n, and then you get this as your output. You see the R code and you see our output. There's different reasons why you would want to not evaluate something. For example, if you just want to show code to someone, but under the hood there's a whole bunch of other weird calculations like hitting a database that you don't want to show, but you're trying to just get through an example, so that's one reason why you would not evaluate something. So that previous slide, it showed just a random draw. There were 10 draws. So how do you say that you made those 10 draws? So you can either type the number in manually, so you can just say, hey, there was 10 draws. You can say print n as a R chunk. Or if you need to write something in line, you can say single backtick, so this is the key next to the number 1, the letter R, and then whatever R code that you want to evaluate, and close the backtick. And then you get a nice little inline R code evaluation. Right? So this way, if you're trying to say something like there were 10 draws, right here is really backtick R and backtick. And it's actually calculating something in real time. So again, all about making sure that when you run your document, it's completely up to date. You don't have to worry about like, oh, I forgot to change that because I hard-coded something or I hard-typed something into my presentation. So this is trying to keep everything as up to date so you don't have to worry about that as much as possible. So you can do a whole bunch of, like part of that same cheat sheet, there's different chunk options, right? So before you saw those evaluate equals true. So the basic syntax is after the letter R, which is saying that within here is R code, you can comma delineate any type of chunk option. And so there's a part in the cheat sheet that lists the more common chunk options, and then down here there's a whole bunch of other options that you have available to you. So there's one, for example, called cache. So if there's like a block of code that's really taking a long time to run, R will cache the results. So it will try not to execute that again unless something above it got changed or something. Cache invalidation is really hard to do in general. So your mileage will, sometimes it'll do the right thing, sometimes it won't. Sometimes you just have to delete the cache folder and just say, hey, you're like supposed to update yourself now. So, you know, your mileage will vary, but it is pretty useful. What else is there? Eval, so whether to run the actual R code. If there's figures, you can actually set the figure caption, height, width, etc. You can all tweak that within the chunk option. And then there's stuff like message results. So message is sometimes if you load up an R package, sometimes there's random stuff that gets printed out. So that's actually the message. So if you're trying to write a document that you're sending to your boss, you kind of really don't care about like, oh, hey, you loaded up ggplot2 and here's like all of these other messages about ggplot2. So you can suppress that message. So that's what the message thing is for. Results, so this is whether you want to show the results, hide the results, etc. And then sometimes, you know, if you are writing R code, you get warning messages. For example, you know, one very convenient way to convert a vector that's encoded as a character vector, but it contains numbers, but some of those numbers are like missing the string. If you just add numeric it, for example, it'll just try its best to convert everything to a number, but then the missing string would just get an NA. And then you'll get a warning message. But you know, it's a perfectly valid and quick way to like convert everything into a number. So you can suppress that warning message as well. So, you know. So the way you do all of this is once you have your document created, you have that nice little yarn and that yarn ball, that little blue knit button. And you can click the knit button. The RStudio shortcut is Control-Shift-K. Something that took me a really long time to figure out is what actually is happening when you click that button. Because sometimes maybe you want to run this in the command line and you don't really want to load up RStudio just to run something, you just want to like render the document. So it actually comes from the R Markdown package. There's a function called render. You give it the R Markdown document, and then this is the actual like function, signature for the render function. So there's different ways you can tweak how the thing is rendering, because I will show you or tell you later on. That blue button sometimes gets really annoying, especially if you try to enforce a like folder structure on an R Markdown document. So sometimes you have to just call it manually. All right, so first demo is what other thing that you can do. So if you've worked with R Markdown before, probably everything I just said was, yes, I know that, cool, thanks. So there's another thing that's, I want to say it's probably like a year and a half, almost 2 years old now, called parameterized documents. And so the cool thing about this is when you click knit, so the rationale behind this is, what if you want to run this document, or this R Markdown document, but you only want to make like one variable change, or you want to swap out a data set, or you want the date to be updated or something. Probably something you don't need to change the original source document. What if you can pass in a variable into the rendering process and then just have the rendering process pick that up and do its thing? So that's the whole goal of parameterized documents. So I think we can show you this. All right.
You might want to make the font bigger.
Yeah. I'm scared. Also, the new preview version of RStudio, like you can have the proper dark mode where like all of your panels are dark. So that's pretty cool. It also has a terminal tab, so you can actually have like a proper thing, not just like this really bad shell. But yeah, so properly dark things is really cool. So the params. So this is an example document. The top YAML header is going to look exactly the same as what I did before, except all I am doing now is I am adding a special section called params. And in here, I simply say, hey, there's a variable called data, and I'm going to give it some value. There's a variable called date, I'm going to give it some value. And then in here, in the regular R code, I can just say params now becomes like a list. And we can pull any of these values out of this YAML header saying params $, and then that value. And then we can just use that as we want. So for example, I'm saying if the data up here is cars, then I'm going to set my main data frame to the cars data. If the data that I set up here is empty cars, or the motor trends car data set, I'm going to set my df variable to the empty cars data. And then otherwise use the dining's data, and then all I'm doing is printing the head of the data. Right? So how does this work? So we can click init, and this will hopefully not error. And you can see here, my data is going to be cars, so it printed out the head of cars. I can say empty cars, and knit this document. And now it's going to print out empty cars. And if I put anything else, it will default to dining's data, right? So that's one really quick way. If you already have a report generated, and the only thing that's different, like day to day, like if you just want to have like some kind of cron job to submit to your boss, like, hey, I wrote this report, and here's your latest data set. All you need to do is change this little top bit, and then the entire report will generate, right?
So,
yep.
For example, if you have two different data sets that might have different headers, you could just have kind of an introduction, parameters section.
Yeah.
And then you could tell it, like, if you want to do, data set A with certain, there's no age restrictions on what you can put in.
No, yeah, so this just ends up being like some key value pair. So like whatever this thing on the left of the colon is going to be the variable that you'll be pulling out in your regular R code. So yeah, in this example, I'm still editing the main document, so it's kind of like, it's not really I'm not showing its full capability, but if I can find my slide deck. You can run render with parameters in it. So you can have a document already laid out with the scaffold for whatever report, and you can just pump in all of these variables as you need straight into the command line. So if I ran this rscript-e and I run the render function and I give it that params document, I can say, hey, here's a list. My data is going to be empty cars. I can set that to cars or something else, and the code itself will know how to handle those variables. So you don't have to edit the YAML file directly, but when you call it in the command line, you can make those switches as you need. So what else can we do? So what else can our Markdown do? You can see everything on the R Markdown website. So Mark had said, if you want to give a talk, reading documentation and preparing for a talk is probably the best way to learn about something, because you are forced to stand in front of people and hopefully convince them that you know what you're talking about. So what else is there? So if you're in the Python world, you'll know something about Jupyter notebooks. So there's a notebook-like system that was highly inspired by the Jupyter notebooks in our Markdown. You can write slides, so this thing right here, or slides that I wrote in our Markdown. You can have interactive documents, so these are like embedded Shiny apps right in either a slide or in some kind of thing. You can even specify entire Shiny dashboards simply using Markdown. I'll talk about it. You can write entire websites in Markdown, or you can write entire books or dissertations or whatever you need. Can all be done in Markdown. And I don't know how much Jared kind of convinced you guys the last time when he spoke here, but he pretty much just lives in R. he refuses to leave even RStudio. So, you know, I mean, the book he wrote was also written in RStudio, and so I guess he's probably going to be like redesigning his website or something just so he can say he never left it. So first thing, notebooks. What are notebooks? So the R notebook, so here's the link to the main R notebook thing. The only real thing that you need to change is in that YAML header, instead of HTML document, you're not going to say HTML notebook. And here's just a bullet pointed list of details. I'll quickly talk over it. The main thing is, if you're familiar with the Jupyter notebook, when you run a cell in the notebook, the output now renders underneath the block of R code. You can switch that on and off. I personally hate that because if you have really long output, now your output just ran off the screen, and now you can't see your output and code at the same time, but that's just me. But the main difference is your file extension is not going to be RMD or HTML. It's going to be ND.html. That's one difference. The little knit button that you click is now not called knit anymore, and it doesn't even have a blue yarn ball, a ball of yarn. It's now called preview. And the main difference there is if you let the output render under your code chunk, what preview does is, since you already have document already created, all preview is doing is taking whatever you saw there and dumping it into an HTML file. Right? So when you are knitting a document, it's really starting a fresh new R session. It's running everything from the top one by one. When you're running in a notebook, the output is much quicker because your output's already in your RStudio session. So you can click preview and then things already so that's one of the benefits. So if you have something that's taking a really long time and you don't want to execute it from top to bottom, you might want to think about using notebooks. All right. So what's really cool about the notebooks is there's a really nice, it interfaces really nice with other languages. So this is an example of SQL, but I'll show you because it says that. So I can show this. So this is the notebook. This is the default notebook. So we saw plot cars. So if I run this, you'll see that instead of popping up in the plots window, it's plotting directly underneath. And when I click preview, this thing should render much quicker. Well, it's kind of like a terrible example, but it'll run a lot faster. So what's also cool with the notebook is you can hide the code. So if you don't need your boss to see the actual R code, but you do, you can hide it. You can download the actual R Markdown document. So this document here, you can download, and there's a nice little button for it. So you have like a few little like tricks or things you can do with the notebook. Here's an example of using other languages. So if you look at the top, you'll see that there's a thing called insert. And if I insert R, that's what the backticks, curly brackets are. So it's entering R block. You can probably add more, I'm not sure, but you can actually add bash blocks, Python blocks, RCPP blocks. I'm showing you SQL blocks, and if you know about stan for Bayesian statistics, you can actually have stan blocks in there as well. And so here's an R notebook. So I can run this first line. So if you've ever made a database connection in R, you'll see that. So if I'm running SQLite, I am making a connection to the SQLite database, and I have this database called Survey. So the repository is all on GitHub, so you'll also have access to this database if you want to play with it as well. And so typically what you'll end up doing, or what you can do, is instead of, if you've ever made a database connection like this in R, you're probably going to end up doing like DB query, and then you're passing in like the raw SQL string, and then it queries the database that way, and then you get a data frame back. But sometimes, that gets pretty annoying because sometimes you have to like escape out weird characters because of something with the query that you're trying to make. But now if you just say, I'm creating a SQL block, and in one of the parameters you say, hey, here's the database connection, you don't have to worry about double quoting your SQL query. You can just write your SQL query as if it was an actual SQL query. So if I run this, it'll just give me back a SQL query. Right? So that's this is an example with SQLite, but this will work with anything that works that you can create a database connection with. Right? So it will work with Postgres, like I don't know, Oracle. last time I gave this talk, someone was really memorized because they have some other like SQL database that their office uses, and there so happens to be a R connection. So you can pass, as long as you can make this connection to some database. Doesn't have to be like one of the mainstream ones. You can do this. What's also really cool is you can save these SQL things back into the R world, right? So it doesn't really make any sense if I can make this query and it gives me back this table, right? It's like, oh great, cool. Like I actually wanted to use that. So you can, so there's a parameter in here called output.var. And you can give it some string that you want, so df_SQL. And when you run this SQL query, instead of being dumped, you'll notice that none of the output got dumped to the screen. But then in my R session, I actually have that saved back into a variable, right? So you still have the same effect from using that db query command from your database connection, except now you can just, write your SQL query like you know how to write your SQL query, and then just dump it back into an R variable, the results back into an R variable. And then you can go the other way around too, right? So you can have a variable in R and use that variable in your SQL command. So I can say like, hey, I have this name called William, and I want to use that. So the way you use that is you give it a question mark and then the R variable that you assigned it to, and then it'll simply just insert that R variable where that SQL string is. This works in this case, so this is like an example that I've worked out. So you can't really pass in like construct the SQL string query as a string, save it to a variable, and just say question mark query, because this will this actually executes the SQL command, so it doesn't make sense to have that as a string. So be a little bit careful about what you can save as an R variable. And then you can see I'm using this William name variable, and I can run the SQL command and get that data set back. And that's using the output var chunk option again. All right. Yeah, so I talked about that. All right, slide. Slides are really exactly the same. You really just change your output into something else. So I talked about this already. The system I'm using is called reveal.js or reveal.js, and you can install it just like any other language. HTML works here as well. So remember, R or Markdown is really just shorthanded HTML. So if you really need like something really specific, you can just start dumping in raw HTML. So if, for example, you need a 2-column slide, you can specify the CSS for 2 columns and then put in divs for 2 columns, and then you'll have a 2-column slide. So this is pure HTML, but sometimes you actually have to go down to the HTML level if you need to refine or tweak something. Interactive documents. So I gave a talk, an intro to Shiny talk about 2 years ago. So if you guys want, I can do it again. But yeah, so you can also start writing. So this isn't going to be an intro to Shiny, but you can embed Shiny things into an R Markdown document. So just in general, Shiny comes with a UI side and a server side. They're typically 2 separate files that you have to maintain. But I like to use the interactive documents part of R Markdown. Just it gets rid of all of the weird code that you have to write, so all you have is a nice little widget, set of widgets to work with. If I write it down, yep. So nothing really fancy in here. I think this is even like the default one. Again, this is not going to be a Shiny tutorial, but you can say here, I just want a set of widgets, and those widgets control some plot. If I run this, you get a set of widgets. This widget controls this plot, and you still get this nice document that you have. And then all of this text is just your regular Markdown code that you've seen before. And if you really need something interactive, you can just throw it in there so it's not a static plot. If, for example, you built your own full-blown Shiny application, you can also embed it in your document as well. So you don't have to be tied to this little Shiny small Markdown widget system. You can have a full-blown application and be like, hey, just take whatever you saw there and just plop it in this document, right? So this is probably useful for, again, if you're writing a report saying, hey, I made this cool thing, here's this cool thing, and then you can write about this cool thing. Again, your boss will probably like it, you'll probably like it, just because it gets to explain what's going on. So. Yes, so you can also have what's called Shiny apps within a presentation as well. So what I showed you was in a document, but I could, for example, have thrown in an entire Shiny system in here and started clicking through it. So again, if you're presenting something for your boss or something, you need to toggle between two things instead of having two static plots, or if it's a bunch of choices and you don't want 50 slides with every single possibility, you can probably throw in a little Shiny app and then just toggle it during your presentation if you need. All right, dashboards. So dashboards, I'm not really going to go through all of this because a lot of this is also Shiny related. But our Markdown part of dashboards is using something called Flux Dashboard. And here's a link to Flux Dashboard. What's cool about it is all the UI stuff, you don't even have to specify like, hey, I want all the panels on the left and the output on the right. You can just divvy up the screen by using Markdown, and then it'll just say like, hey, you have like a 2-panel UI, and what do you want on the left, what do you want on the right. And again, not much changes in the YAML header. Your output just says Flux Dashboard, Flux Dashboard. And so this is examples of what it looks like. So I pulled this straight from the actual Flux Dashboard page. And so what's really cool about Flux Dashboard, even compared to regular Shiny, is it takes up the entire width and height of the screen that you want. So you get something that's really sleek and clean, and and it also forces you to, what do you want to convey? And that's all you need to put into your dashboard. So here's another one, all from the main site. So you can see there's not that much clutter going on. And one part of that reason why there isn't much clutter is you're writing in Markdown and only has so much flexibility, but it also gives you something that's relatively simple and clutter-free. So, and then you can actually have something that's a giant map and panels on the top and on the right if you need to. And really all you're doing here is saying header 1 is one part of this, header 2 is another part of this, and then you're just throwing in what you want to put into various which section in your document. All right, websites. So you can also build websites, and that's using something called Lockdown. And websites is actually something that's fairly new, sometime within the past year. This came out. So if you're familiar with GitHub and GitHub Pages, that uses a system called Jekyll. Lockdown uses something called Hugo. And the way you install it, you can install it using Lockdown from straight from GitHub. You have to install Hugo. So Lockdown also has this install Hugo thing that will also install that for you. When you want to create a new site, they have a convenient function called new site, and it will set up all of the files that you need for creating a new site. The most important thing here is it creates the RStudio project file. So you get a nice little RStudio project file, you click that, it'll open up in RStudio, and now you're in now you can start editing all the various components that'll render into the website. And if you want to serve it, so if you want to preview it before you actually push this up into GitHub or something, you can run serve site and it'll render the site for you. So there is this entire quote-unquote book about Lockdown that you can refer to. Oh, actually, that preview links. All right, I think this is the last topic. All right, books. So we have Lockdown for websites, we have Bookdown for books. here's documentation. Here's an example of all the various free books that are created. So all of the stuff by RStudio, when they write a book that you can nicely have on the internet, that's actually using Bookdown. So all of these books, yes, you can read them for free. They're also written in Bookdown. And you install the Bookdown package. You can do it straight from GitHub or using. So here's an example of what like the minimal viable product of a book. You have a very similar YAML header. You can see some of the differences are right here. And then at the base of the book, or the body of the book, is regular Markdown. And instead of our Markdown render, you have this render book. And the output, so all the components for the book, will now be created under a subfolder called _book. So let's show you what that looks like. Right. So when you create this new book thing, all you really need is this index.rmd file. So it has to be called index.rmd. Here's your YAML header, and then here's your book. This is Hello World, Hi, Bye. I think if I hit knit, this works. Yeah. So that website, if you've ever opened any of those Bookdown books before, this looks very similar to that. And you can see this was all specified by regular basic Markdown. So how do we do something a little bit more complicated? If you want various chapters in your book, it has to follow a very specific naming convention. So you still have to have this index.rmd file, and you can search through this YAML header if you want. But I just want to point you to, you have to have, essentially what it looks for is your chapters have to be, the files have to begin with a number and then some kind of title. So 01 will become chapter 1, 02 will become chapter 2, etc., etc., etc. So you can have a very complicated chapter like this example for chapter 1. You can have very simple chapters like I have for 2, 3, 4, etc., etc. Now, if we knit this document, we get a more complicated book where each one of those documents is now its own separate chapter that we can click through. So this was that very complicated one with the introduction, etc., etc. So a lot of this stuff here really is no different from the regular on Markdown stuff. So this is exactly what you would normally be typing. This is your regular R code. This is the regular chunk output that you would have normally gotten. All that's really going on is you have a specific folder structure. Tweak your YAML header a little bit, and then you can click knit, and now you have this like really cool book. There's two things with the book that you have to pay attention to, that you have to make a decision about. Whether you want to merge all your books together and then knit, so all the chapters, and then knit them, or do you want to knit each chapter individually and then merge them together? There are pluses and minuses for each method. For example, one of them doesn't allow subdirectories, so if you want something that follows a folder hierarchy, you're kind of limited. I think chunk names have to be unique, so you can't really have the same chunk name in one document. So if you decide to merge it all together, then you have to make sure that none of your chunk names you have to make sure all your chunk names are unique. Versus if you knit and merge, then it really doesn't matter, as long as it's unique within the chapter. So something to keep in mind. So working directories I've talked about, they're really annoying if you want to follow some kind of folder hierarchy, mainly because I think they might have actually fixed this now, but I still haven't really tested it enough. But if you work with R projects and you have your R Markdown file somewhere in some other subfolder, typically if it was a regular R script, you would expect the R script's working directory to be where the project folder is. That project file, the R project file is. But when you start working with Markdown documents and you click the blue render button, which is why sometimes I hate it, it switches the working directory to where that R Markdown file is, instead of the root where it should be. So that's just something to keep in mind, especially if you work with R projects, or if you have like some working agreement where the working directory should be, and then you start making subfolders. That's something you have to be very cautious about. One way I got around it was, so there's this function called interactive, and this essentially is it returns a true and false, whether you're running R in the console in interactive mode as if you were typing, or if you're running R in the background as like a script or something. So when you click the blue knit button, it's actually not being rendered in interactive mode, so you can actually pass flags like, hey, if you're in interactive mode, here's where my data is. If you're not in interactive mode, here's where my data is, right? So you can set like a working directory, right? Because the thing you don't want to do is like write set WD in your code, because then it will never work like consistently ever, right? So at least you can have this interactive flag and just point it to somewhere else. And then you can use this normalized path function to actually build out the proper path for you. Oh, yeah, so there's also another option that you can do that you can probably work with in conjunction with the interactive flag that just sets the working directory for the notebook or R Markdown file if you do. Here's some other stuff. So there's a bunch of other stuff you can do. There's something called SWeave. If you just want to scrap Markdown entirely and you just want to write everything in tech, then you're going to be looking at SWeave. I think the main rationale behind that is tech allows you to do cross-referencing if you have multiple tech files. Has a pretty robust like bibliography system, so if you're just used to working in LaTeX, you can totally write. You can forget everything I said and just replace everything, like, and just look at the SWeave documentation. And you can write your LaTeX code and just have R chunks along with it as well. Your chunks just aren't backticks. I think it's less than, greater than, equal, and then it closes it with the @ sign. So your chunk is just specified differently, but everything else is the same. Yeah, so that's my talk. And I'll leave this slide up for a little bit. So if you, that's me on Twitter and GitHub, and if you need the slides, you can take a picture and it's right there. So, thanks. Any questions? Yes, no? You can, I'll just go that way.
Yeah, I make lots of HTML documents, and I oftentimes, like, I'll make a table, and I find myself running out of width. Do you have any recommendations on?
I just did this the other day. I think eWay like has this package called like Pretty Print or P-Print or something. Oh yeah, it's cable. and if you are like, if you have a data frame and you print, you don't call print on the data frame. If you just run the data frame or something and it prints out. That's one way I've gotten around, like, stop wrapping this table and just print like a little prettier. Like, that's one way you can get around that.
But if you get to like 6 or 7 variables, you kind of...
Yeah, and then there's like, and part of it is also like R itself, so you can set like, one of the options is like what the print width is, and you can set that to like however many 9s you feel appropriate. That would be like the only thing you have option with. I guess if you want, you can play around with like writing your own like CSS and just like, hey, here's this output block. Make this like, however, just like have it like be a different width or something. So that's probably something to play around with. But something.
Yeah, can R Markdown make slides?
Yes, so this is like, this entire slide deck.
Is this present?
This is reveal. So yeah, so like this is the R Markdown document for like, this is my presentation.
I saw there's the game like slide, no?
The slide itself will
Yeah,
be,
the
well,
slide
oh, okay.
itself.
So the slide itself, did I not put it on GitHub? So if I click knit on this, it'll knit the, I really hope it doesn't error. Right. So there's an R Markdown file, this RMD file, and then the output is this HTML file. So I will make sure this HTML file is on GitHub. So you should be able to download it. And then there is,
yeah. This wouldn't be a DC Tech meeting if I didn't ask, how well does it interface with SharePoint?
attach the HTML document. I don't know. It probably doesn't. Yeah, I don't know. I don't work with SharePoint. I know of it because I've used it in the past, but I would say like, I don't know, if you also use like GitLab or something, just put in SharePoint a link to the GitLab repo or something. Probably one way around it. I don't know.
Yeah, I have a question, but before that, I can make a comment about
the HTML table.
Yeah, the HTML. There is a library called Pandoc, and in that part you can specify some of the arguments. You can make them, for example, they can wrap the column names to make sure even you have a more number of columns, they all fit in one part. And yeah, so just Google that and you'll see some argument. My question is, if you insert, for example, the RShiny component in R Markdown, and you would like to share that one with your colleague.
Oh, yeah.
What's the way to?
So because Shiny under the hood is actually making R calls in the background, your colleague is going to have R and Shiny and all of that backbone infrastructure installed. Otherwise, it'll work.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's one. Another one, so for example, if we have Shiny, we can put that one in the, what's that?
Shiny Apps IO. Yeah.
But if that's inserted in our Markdown, if we put that one, so where we put it? We put it on...
So what gets inserted, if you already have a full-blown application, I don't think I've ever done it. I don't think I've done it. So the way you specify inserting an application, you actually have to point to the directory that the app is in, like the actual source code. You don't point to like shinyapps.io. Let me see if So like right here, when you are embedding a full-blown Shiny app, it literally points to a folder on your computer that has the UI and server code in it. So you're not pointing to an existing website. If it's already an existing website, you can probably write like the raw HTML to dump in an iframe or something and just render that in there. But if you're already, if it's already an app on your computer, then you have to point it to the Shiny app source code on your laptop or on your computer. Does that make sense?
So we cannot kind of like use that trick to put your Shiny app locally on that Shiny app IO and share the URL with another user and they can play with just because this is inserted in
Yeah. So I mean, if your Shiny app's already deployed, you can either create a link to the deployed app or embed it in an iframe, like put the link in an iframe and just have it render in an iframe. Yeah, that's, I think, I could totally be wrong about this as well, but I think that's how you would do it. Yeah.
So it seemed like Markdown has some really great options for different files to export into. I was wondering about specifically in PowerPoint, like if you're writing if you're in a space where you have R and you build some great graphics and you want to push them to PowerPoint and you want PowerPoint to update, like a monthly PowerPoint. Does Markdown support that? Because it didn't seem like PowerPoint was mentioned. No. So I don't know if it really comes with extra steps from HTML or whatever output into a PowerPoint.
So I'm not very. So this is also a Linux machine, so that tells you how much you know about PowerPoint.
Okay. I've used it in the past. There is, I forget the name of it, but there is a package that allows you to create, because you know, PowerPoint and most the modern Microsoft documents are XMLs, right?
Right.
And it allows you to create sort of the XML skeleton.
Okay.
That package doesn't, I forget, it's been a while since I used it. I don't remember if, so you can create a Word file from this, but I don't know if there's a, when you do the presentation, I think there's a presentation maybe on a Mac or maybe on a PC, you get a radio button that says PowerPoint. I don't know.
Does PowerPoint allow you to like specify a path to an image, for example, and then if that image updates, the PowerPoint itself update?
With an Excel object it does, but like I don't know. I just don't know if there's a way like coding in R, you use plot, you mark it down and put it in HTML, but if you mark it down, therefore it goes to the PowerPoint stack. So.
I have never actually tried that.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. Is there any other questions on this side before I start looking on that side? Yeah.
Sorry, if you ever completed on Markdown, but it's usually published to like RPubs, but did you say if I wanted to publish to like GitHub, it needed to be to the GitHub document?
Oh, yeah, so I definitely have like a working example of this. I really hope I have a working example of this. I guess I haven't been working with our monthly box. Yeah, so I can't find like a good example. But yeah, so what you'll see very common with our projects is sort of like reading this work. Yeah. I can find you an example, but what ends up being very common if you're working with GitHub a lot is on the page you'll see a like readme.rmd. And that's the file, that's the R Markdown file that's getting knitted and created. The output of that becomes readme.md. And then when GitHub sees that, that gets rendered on the GitHub page. So those two end up being, those two travel together as like a pair because you're saying that the output is now a GitHub Markdown file.
So in the YAML, it's GitHub document?
Yeah, GitHub _document, I believe. Somewhere on the cheat sheet. Yeah, it's somewhere in there. But yeah, it's on that that table on the cheat sheet.
So the R Markdown files it is easily to be translated into the IDE.
Yeah. So like you tweak like that little YAML file and then like essentially Pandoc reads that as its parameters and just dumps it out to whatever file.
And also this slides. Right?
Yeah.
It's easier to translate that.
Any other questions? I'll hang around for a bit. I won't be going to bar because I just am in the middle of moving into a new apartment, so I need to start hauling some boxes before work tomorrow. So I'll be around. But yeah, so if you want, you can come up and we can talk. So, yes, thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming. If you want to go around for drinks, just hang around here. There's plenty of pizza, so if you want to grab some pizza and take it with you, please feel free to do that. And come see us if you want to get involved or do a talk or whatnot. Thanks, folks.
Yeah, one of my clients, I've developed I've been calculating odds for them. I've been really enjoying it. So like hunting, they do this weird thing with the lottery, this weird lottery system, and so I've been trying to yes. Yeah. So sometimes you've got like that weighted random.
Again, I'm
They do, I would say 80% of the work is system related, so Salesforce related, so implementation, updates, custom applications, and then 20% of it is data analytics and data science. You know, like Salesforce is a CRM, so you get a lot of data about
your first choice,
and
second choice, they evaluate.
provide services to understand the data and provide certain output. Like
So trying to calculate.
Sorry, I take pictures of Curry for these guys.
Thanks. So yeah, so what I've said is that they're looking for people that have some Java experience, because it's based on the Java life.